on these Thursday classes. We have to be much more time conscious. So I'm really excited to teach this class, Big Fat Lies. This is the first time I taught this particular class and the first time that I'm bringing this information all together into one class. And actually it was, when I first decided to teach it, I kind of knew what I was going to teach, but until I really sat down with the research and like started putting it all together, and then I was like, wow, this is like a lot of stuff. And then I don't know, I'd never put it like all in one place before to where it really, I don't know, even me, I was kind of like, oh, well duh, oh, like I just, every time I was writing the notes for this, it was bringing more to my attention. So that's kind of fun. So let's just start out by talking about fat basics, okay? So the most critical part of any plant is the fatty acids inside of the seed, okay? Those are essential and they contain the richest and the most flavorful part of the plant. So let's take, for example, a corn stalk, which is like 8 foot tall. The kernels are the seed, and only 5% of each kernel contains, or 5% of each kernel is oil. So from this giant 8 foot tall plant, you can only extract just a couple of grams of oil. So it doesn't really seem like a big deal until you start to think about how precious the fat is to the life it's contained within the seed. Every single cell of the human body requires fat for repair and maintenance. It requires saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat, and each type serves a different purpose. These fats are necessary for metabolism, for binding to nutrients and actually moving them and transporting them and utilizing them in the body. They're necessary for protection of organs and warmth. That's not even to mention the fact that it makes your food taste good, right? So when you're talking from a culinary perspective, there's 4 things that take food from just sort of like to like yummy. And those are fat, acid, salt, and sweet. And we'll talk more about that stuff next week at the Aprons Kitchen cooking class when we're cooking all of our healthy foods. But it's just important to note that fat is really important for satiety, it's important for flavor, and it helps to manage blood sugar. This is a great follow-up to the sugared class because we can now start to talk about we're removing the sugar, so it kind of leaves you craving something. And most often that's because there's not enough fat in the diet. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with the basics, really simple stuff. So lipids, that's fats, are organic substances that don't dissolve in water. Okay, so they are they come in all different shapes and sizes, and they're kind of shaped like a little bit like, I guess you could call it a caterpillar, a carbon caterpillar. They're carbons that are combined, and I didn't draw the whole thing out here, but they have H's, so those are hydrogens attached to them. Now when all of the carbons have an H, that's what makes it saturated. It's saturated with hydrogen. Okay, so when they don't all have an H, then that makes them either mono or polyunsaturated. Based on a double bond, which if we were going to make it, there's like a little kink in one place, that makes it monounsaturated, and if there's a kink in more than one place, a double bond, then that makes it polyunsaturated. Okay, so I know you don't really care about that, but I think it's interesting to note that the chemical difference, but also they're also very similar. Like it's like they're so different but so the same, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Fats are actually solid at room temperature, or they're solid at room temperature, so obviously they're solid when they're refrigerated as well. Oils are liquid. And we'll differentiate between all of that. But all of them are triglycerides, and they're made up of 3 fatty acids and a glycerol. So the little molecules look kind of like this. You've got your glycerol, and you've got your little fatty acids attached to it. Just base knowledge, but it's important to note that these can vary in length, and that's the real key. So a short chain would be like 4 carbons, and a long chain would be like 24 carbons. And we're going to talk more about that as we go in, and you're going to see that even within your saturated fats, that's really important because they don't all act the same. They have a different chemical composition. The only other thing that's kind of interesting on the chemistry side of this, so these carbons are numbered, okay? And so when there's something happening at the, like the double bond is happening at the third carbon, then that makes it an omega-3. When it's happening at the sixth carbon, that's what makes it an omega-6. So if you're like geeky into science, I think that's an interesting little point. If you're not, I still think it's interesting, so get interested in it. All right, so we'll start out talking about saturated fat, and I want to talk about that first because I think people are super afraid of saturated fat, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about saturated fat out there, okay? So saturated fats come from animal fats and tropical oils. So that would be like your coconut oil is a saturated fat, for example. All right, these are solid at room temperature. They're solid at room temperature. When they're heated, they become liquid, obviously. But they're not liquid at room temperature, is my point. Each carbon in the chain is bound by a hydrogen. So these hydrogens all are attached to all the C's on there. And that's what makes it saturated. So it's saturated with as many hydrogens as possible. So that's important because it makes it very stable. Okay, so you see it's completely balanced. If there was little H's on all these C's, it's saturated, it's stable. It's like filled to the rim, it's packed out. Can you see how that's important? So that's really important because, number one, that's what makes it solid. But number two, these type of fats don't go bad the way that mono and polyunsaturated fats do. So they can be heated to high temperatures without the danger of changing the chemical composition. Okay? That's key because later on when we talk about those fats, you'll note that when you change that chemical composition, that's when what was once good for you becomes very bad for you and actually is degenerative in your body. So it's really important. These do not become rancid. And they're really your best fats for cooking with. Okay, and we'll talk more about that because I know everybody's like hooked on EVOO, extra virgin olive oil, but we'll talk about why that can become an issue later on. So not all saturated fats are the same because we talked about the length, how many carbons are in there. So for example, a short chain saturated fat would have like 4 carbons. Okay, that would be like your butter and your milk. But you can go all the way to the longest, which is like 24 carbons. And that would be like cacao nibs. If you've ever had cacao nibs, those are long chain ones. They all provide energy and building blocks for hormones. So that's one reason why they're super important. They slow down the absorption of your meals, so you can go longer between feedings. You have better blood sugar, like your blood sugar is more even, and they're carriers and contain the necessary vitamins A, D, and K. So it's important because when you consume vitamins A, D, and K without the presence of fat, so like for example, take vitamin D fortified skim milk. If you were to drink that glass of skim milk, that vitamin D is not absorbable. There's no fat present. So it's pointless. It doesn't do anything for you. And so you must have that fat present in order to absorb those nutrients. Okay? The shorter chain ones are easier to digest, and so people with digestive issues can benefit quite a lot from those. They also are the ones that feed probiotics, so the good bacteria in your gut. The medium chain ones are not stored as fat in the body, and they actually create thermogenesis, which means that they elevate your metabolism. They create heat in the body. These are the ones that contain lauric acid, like coconut oil is a great example of medium chain saturated fat. Ironically, it's also the fat that's found in breast milk. So it contains lauric acid, which is a massive immunity booster. So the consumption of these helps to prevent illness. Okay? Your heart actually draws on saturated fat for function. The long-chain saturated fats, however, these are the ones that come from your animal proteins. These are the ones you think of, like your bacons and your beefs and things like that. When they are consumed in excess and they're not in a balanced diet, so when there's an excess of carbohydrates present, that is the only time when these fats become sticky and can create some sort of issue. But notice that it's really important to note that it's when the rest of the diet is out of balance. Specifically, carbohydrate intake or sugar intake is too high. Without that happening, that's not the case. Okay? So the demonization of saturated fat actually started in 1953 with Dr. Ancel Keys, when he put out that saturated fat was linked to heart disease. This became dogma, and the medical community jumped on it, and they've accepted it since then, until just recently, when they started to realize that actually, as we've removed saturated fat from the diet, the health has degenerated across age, across population. Okay? The National Institute of Health actually invested millions of dollars trying to prove that saturated fat was bad for you, and they ended up finding that they could draw no correlation between the two, saturated fat and heart disease. Okay? As a matter of fact, globally, many communities exist on saturated fat and have no notable existence of heart disease. So these would be examples would be like the Eskimo people, the Inuit people. I think we've talked about this. If you've ever heard me talk about it, I always mention the Inuit people. They consume greater than 80% of their diet is saturated fat. There is no instance, really, of heart disease. Nomadic desert tribes, they have a very high saturated fat diet. The Maasai are actually some of the healthiest people in the world, and they exist almost exclusively on blood, milk from cows, and then meat. Yeah. It's not very appetizing, but they're like the healthiest people in the world. I mean, it's unbelievable. The Maasai people are pretty amazing. Okay, so we have 3 different types of things that we want to talk about here. We'll just put it there. Fatty acids. Okay, so we have stearic acid. That's the one that's found in animal fat. And it has been proven to have no effect on cholesterol whatsoever. Okay? Tropical fats contain both palmitic and lauric acid. These could raise cholesterol. They do raise cholesterol, but they raise the good cholesterol. So you can see that that's quite quite contrary to what you've heard for many years, or you've thought for many years. We've all avoided fat dramatically. And the reality is that these saturated fats are actually they're the ones that help bring the good cholesterol up in general. So yes, your total cholesterol can raise, but the good cholesterol raises with that. Okay? It's important to note that saturated fats have been in the diet forever, since the beginning of humankind. So if we think of it from an evolutionary standpoint, which I always like to go back to that, because as the human has developed, nature only selects for what works. If it doesn't work, nature would never select for that, right? The species would die off if it doesn't work. So it's interesting that the mammary glands of the mammal, which is the only source of the developing mammal for food, is a producer of saturated fat. That fact alone tells us that saturated fat is absolutely critical for development and life survival. Otherwise, nature wouldn't have selected for that. It doesn't make sense. All right? So, we're going to skip that part because it's not very important. It's all important, but I want to get to everything. So which saturated fats? Which ones should we eat? Your best sources of saturated fat. Saturated fat, or things that contain saturated fat, it's important that your fats are where you spend a little bit more money. Okay? So you want the best sources possible. With saturated fats, it's really, really best to go with grass-fed or organic. So the fattier that something is, the more important it is that you purchase the highest quality that you can find. So Some great examples of good sources. Raw or organic butter, okay? Or raw or organic whole milk. These are high in vitamin A, D, and E. If you get the raw version, they also provide probiotics. Okay? Ghee, which is spelled G-H-E-E. Ghee is a clarified butter. All the milk solids have been removed, so that's really important for someone who might have a dairy sensitivity. It's excellent for cooking. It has a very high cooking temperature, and it flavors food really nicely. Lard. So lard is actual animal fat. So high quality bacon, you've cooked it, you pour off the fat, and it can literally sit on your counter. And some of you may even remember like your grandparents having like a larder on the counter, and they cooked with that. So that's really great. Also, the lard has both, interestingly, when you buy that high quality, it has both your saturated and your unsaturated fats, including your omega-3s, which everybody's heard of omega-3s and knows the importance of omega-3s. It's also interesting to note that trans fat is a saturated fat, but it's a very, very bad, unnatural fat that doesn't occur anywhere in nature. You should avoid trans fat at all costs. Okay? Also, you might find it interesting that there's actually, so if I were to ask you what is a saturated fat, like give me an example of a saturated fat. Can anybody just give me one? Anything? Like not coconut oil, like what do you think of as saturated fat? If I was going to tell you to cut back on saturated fat, what would you cut back on?
Maybe red meats?
Red meat. Okay, great. That's a perfect example. Just the one I was looking for. I'm glad I told you that before class. So actually, there's no such thing as like a pure fat in nature. So nothing is just a saturated fat. As a matter of fact, so remember we talked about this molecule with the glycerol and the, oh my gosh. Let's go back here. I'm drawing a blank. With the glycerol and the 3 fatty acids. There we go. The glycerol and the 3 fatty acids. So this molecule can actually have a saturated one, an unsaturated one, and a monounsaturated and a polyunsaturated all on one molecule. So it's quite fascinating because we think of them in terms of this is an unsaturated fat. This is or a monounsaturated fat. This is a polyunsaturated fat. This is a saturated fat. But in fact, all fats are a combination of some. You might even be surprised that olive oil contains over 13% saturated fat. Probably didn't even know that because we've demonized saturated fat and attached it to animal protein. So high quality beef fat, so that grass-fed organic beef fat, is actually less than half saturated fat. All of the rest of it is made up of mono and polyunsaturated fats. So when you make that comparison, you can start to see that there's actually no fat other than trans fat that's really bad for you as long as the quality and the preparation is right. So we're going to move on and we're going to talk about monounsaturated fats. So monounsaturated fats are found in olives, sesame oil, avocados, some nuts, and canola oils. These are liquid at room temperature, but they become cold, or when they become cold, they become solid. There you go. They become solid when cold. There it is. So these are, in the monounsaturated fats, they don't have hydrogens attached to all the carbons, and they have a double bond, which creates like a kink in the chemical structure. So instead of just being a straight line, you've got like a little kink in them at that double bond, and that's what makes them liquid at room temperature. Again, there's short chain, medium chain, and long chain too. Short chain would be like milk, medium chain would be like coconut or palm oil, and long chain includes things like almonds, olives, pistachios, seeds, canola oils, all your nut and seed oils, things like that. These are really important heart protectors and really great skin protectors as well. So they provide nourishment to the skin. Olive oil is probably the most well-known of the monounsaturated fats, and it's a potent antioxidant. It's anti-inflammatory, it improves arthritis, and heals the joints. Now, here's where we mess up olive oil. Like everything, or most things in the American diet, we hear that something's good, the Mediterranean diet, and then we just like go crazy with it, right? So actually, olive oil is not a high heat oil. When you heat olive oil to a high heat, you break the chemical structure and actually make it pro-inflammatory in the body. It works against you. It becomes degenerative. Okay, so it's best when it's consumed raw, so not heated. It can, however, withstand low to medium heats. So this would be like if you were cooking something maybe in the crock pot on low. I don't know, that'd still be like a long cooking time. Anything that you were going to cook on a low heat, though, or that was like warm. So here's a great way to do it. Let's say you were going to saute something, and you really like the flavor of olive oil. Then you might do that with a little bit of broth or a little bit of a saturated fat like lard or something like that. And then at the end, right at the finish, put the olive oil on there for the benefits of the monounsaturated fat. Okay? It's also great in dressings, in things like pesto that you can create and then add to your meat or whatever after cooking. Canola oil is also in this class of monounsaturated fats. What's interesting is that this oil is very, very controversial. It's generally made from genetically modified plants. The rapeseed plant is actually, but they call it canola, I guess because rapeseed oil just doesn't even sound nice. It just sounds bad. Okay? Actually, consumption of canola oil is correlated with vitamin E deficiency and lesions on the heart. So when you have a lot of canola oil, and where would you think you would find canola oil? In a lot of your processed foods. So often you'll even see recipes that call for, like baking recipes call for canola oil. So a lot of times in baking you'll see canola oil, a lot of processed foods you'll see canola oil. It's actually banned for use in baby formula. So I always kind of use that as a guide. If the FDA bans something from baby formula, it's usually a pretty good indication that they know that it's really not that great for you and you probably shouldn't take it either. It becomes rancid very easily and it's not heat safe. As a matter of fact, it becomes dangerous when it's heated. It becomes actually dangerous within the body. So, canola oil. There's that. Okay, polyunsaturated oil. So let's move on. Polyunsaturated oil. So these double bonds we talked about, there's 2 or more of those double bonds. They have quite a few less hydrogens, so much less stable. So that would mean that they're always liquid. So this would be like, does anyone in here have you ever seen like flaxseed oil? So it's like liquid if you set it on the counter, it's liquid if it's in the refrigerator, versus like olive oil, if you put it in the refrigerator, it becomes solid. Okay, great. All right. This is a very, very unstable oil. It spoils easily and becomes rancid. So that's really important because it also contains a lot of essential nutrients to you. However, when it's not consumed properly, it does the opposite. It creates degeneration in the body. Okay? Your body cannot make polyunsaturated fats, so they must be consumed through food. This is where your omega-3s and your omega-6s fall. Okay, so we talked about the double bond, if it falls on the 3rd or if it falls on the 6th carbon, that's your omega-3 and your omega-6. So great forms of polyunsaturated would be flax, hemp, walnut or walnut oils, pumpkin seeds, and your fatty fishes. These are considered your healing fats. So anytime you have any sort of issue that's related to inflammation in the body, these are the fats that can help with that healing. Okay? They cannot withstand heat. And actually heating these oils creates free radicals. I'm sure you've heard of free radicals and their correlation to cancers and inflammation, things like that. So I say that because I want you to consider for a moment how many recipes you see that people just dump flaxseed into everything and then they bake it. Muffins with flaxseed, whatever, like all kinds of baked goods, and you throw flaxseed into it. It's really important to note, flaxseed cannot withstand heat. It becomes rancid, and it actually creates free radicals in your body. They're very inflammatory.
What about chia seeds?
Chia seeds fall, yes, they fall in this order. Yeah, that's a new thing. Now that chia is like really big, people put it like in granolas and all that kind of stuff, and they cook it. And really, yeah, cooking the chia seed. Chia seeds should be eaten in cold consumption. So like smoothies. I just do chia seed pudding. For me, that's just like super yum. I just had some before I came here. After I was writing all this, I was like, oh, omega-3s, let me make some chia seed pudding.
So these kind of oils, you would just use them for salads?
So these kind of oils, so like walnut oil you would want to use. You could also use them like once a meal is prepared, make like a dipping sauce or like you said, like a salad, drizzle it over them. Like flaxseed oil is great for adding to smoothies, to juices, to things like that. The whole flaxseed is actually the most stable version. So you can buy flaxseed already ground. These are very, very unstable. So if you buy flaxseed, you should, in a perfect world, buy it whole and then grind it like with a coffee grinder as needed. Or grind a small portion in a container and keep it in your freezer. And then once that's empty, grind another batch. But not like a whole, like a bag takes forever to go through. And it should be always stored, at least in your refrigerator, depending on how fast you go through it. If you don't go through it fast, then in the freezer. So there's that. Okay. So let me give you some examples. Fatty fish, omega-3s are going to be like your fatty fish, your salmon, chia seed, flaxseed, hemp, sardines, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, and your algae foods. I don't know if any of you guys eat algae. It's kind of a new thing. Into it. It's important to note, this is really interesting, that it's more important to consume these fats, the omega-3s, the omega-6s, the polyunsaturated fats, than it is to remove bad fat. So it's better for your body to add these than it is, yes, should you still take out the bad fats? Yes, we've talked about that. But these are healing fats, so they're absolutely critical to optimal health. They're important for your adrenals, for your hormones, for your brain cells. As a matter of fact, all cells of the body. When there's deficiency. When there's deficiency in these omega-3s, there's behavioral issues, mental degeneration, inflammation, edema, a lower metabolism, depression, anger. All these things can come back to deficiency there. Okay? So your omega-6s are generally found in nuts and seeds, and then the oils of those. Those are the healthiest places to consume those. What's really interesting to note is the most important thing is the ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. So if we have omega-6s and omega-3s, and 6s come first, we want a ratio of 1 to 1 up to 1 to 2.5. Okay, and this is 6s to 3s. Okay, so we want more 3s than we have 6s. What's interesting is that the standard American diet ranges anywhere from 20 to 1 to 40 to 1. So you can see that ratio. So let's just write it so you can compare it. 20 to 1 up to 40 to 1. Okay, those are those omega-6s to omega-3s. The standard American diet is far, far, far from what is the ideal ratio. So how does that happen? What's happened there? Okay? What's happened is that when we buy conventional meats, so let's just take a cow, for example. So a cow is taken to a feedlot and it's fed grain. Well, a cow was never meant to eat grain in the first place. cows were meant to eat grass. But when they consume grain, your grains are where you get omega-6s. So then the fats in their bodies then become high in omega-6 instead of being high in omega-3. This is why when you're consuming fat, the more fat there is in a product, the more important it is to buy the higher quality. Because your grass-fed and your organic meats are going to have more omega-3s. Your conventional meats are going to have more omega-6s. Okay, that's really important because when this ratio is out, it can lead to all sorts of issues in the body like those we've talked about: inflammation, autoimmunity, diabetes, autism, ADD, ADHD, high blood pressure, anger issues, depression, all these things that we've talked about last week and this week that are related to inflammation in the body. Okay? So when we take conventional meats and then our high consumption of grains in the American diet, and processed grains at that, our omega-6s go through the roof. Then you take into consideration our low consumption of those omega-3s, things like fatty fishes, chia, flax, salmon, and you can see how that balance gets out of whack, right? Okay, so that's the background. Oh, one other thing. The other thing that's contributed to this is the food guide pyramid, which hopefully by now most of you guys have attended talks of mine before, which we all know that the food guide pyramid is not the one that we want to follow. And it really pushes those grains at the bottom, and so then that encourages us to eat more grains, and that's what we teach. And it's not that grains are demonic or super, super, super bad for you. Many people feel better when they've removed them or when they prepare them properly. The problem is the processed grains. So in our food guide pyramid, pasta is exactly the same as quinoa. And, wheat bread is no different than teff or, I don't know, I can't even think of another grain. I don't really eat them that much, so it's hard for me to think of any. So let's go through your little handout here, because I think that in here we may find some more questions. So in this handout for you, I've kind of lined out, I'm not going to go through necessarily all this and read all of this to you, but I've lined out how fats relate to cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and brain health. Okay, so I'd love you to just read through those facts and see how those things play in. The main thing that I want to mention in addition to those is because obviously most of you are members here at the gym, or all of you really are members here at the gym, and generally, though you want to feel good, you also, many of you have weight loss goals, and you want your body to reach a certain composition. So I mention that because it's worth mentioning that fat must be present, and most likely present in a higher percentage than you're consuming it right now in order for that to happen. Okay? So last week at Sugared, we talked about the principle of crowding out, bringing things in. These are the things this is one of the things that you can bring in to really help you fight those sugar cravings. Fat is so satisfying to the body. It quells hunger. It keeps your blood sugar at an even level. And the most important time of day to do that is first thing in the morning, because you start that blood sugar nice and even. If you start your day with a high carbohydrate breakfast and not enough fat to bring that down, then you start this roller coaster first thing in the morning. You'll never catch it. Okay? And then at night you're craving and you're eating after dinner and you need sugar and desserts, or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, depending on what time you wake up. So it's really important that you incorporate fat, and most people, when they have weight loss goals, that's one of the things that they cut out. If it says, and just excuse my language here, Bev and I have laughed about this many times, but if it says low fat or fat free, that is code for chemical shitstorm. Don't put it in your body. Okay? Nothing. You should never consume anything that's low fat or fat free. If it was supposed to be low fat, there would be a milk separator on the cow's udder. You know, if you weren't supposed to eat the egg yolks, they would come out as one white, one yellow, you throw the yellow ones away. Okay? As they are in nature, there's nothing that man has made that's better than what God made first. He put it here for our. We've evolved to what we are based on the things put on the earth. So that's really important to remember because saturated fat has been around. You know, we've come to what we are because of saturated fat. Okay? The only other thing that I want to mention, running back to saturated fat, is that the more sedentary you are, the less fat you should consume in general, but the less calories you should consume as well. Okay, that's really important. So if we think back to like our great-grandfather maybe, he would eat, think of like what they would eat, very hearty meals and hard fats and things like that. But they would also get off their butt and move, right? They didn't sit still for 8 hours a day. So they would consume, though we want to look back and see customary foods, remember that the lifestyle was also quite different. And so you have to keep that in relation. On here in this handout, I also put some great notes for you about cooking with oils. Like it's all lined out for you. Which ones are your high heat oils? Your coconut oil, your butter, your ghee. What are your moderate heat oils? Also a light saute. Okay, so olive oil is there. You can do it, but best is to add it right at the end. So don't leave it on the heat for a long time. Cook it in some broth and add that olive oil in. Sesame oil, and then it says canola is listed there because it is that type, but it's also mentioned that it's very controversial and it's very fragile. Okay, and then the ones at the bottom are your cold use oils. And I really want to point out in the cold use oils, avocado oil, because some of you have switched over to paleo style of eating, and you will see a lot of people that put recipes out there where you like flash fry things in avocado oil and things like that. That is a cold use only oil. The paleo community is also really bad about putting things out there that just like chia seeds and flax seeds and everything, like just bake it all, you know, and those are not meant to be consumed because they just want to take everything that's good and dump it all together and, you know, but it's not really, they're not traditionally used that way, and the reason they're not traditionally used that way is because we, over time, have traditionally used things the way they were meant to be used, and we've gotten so far away from customary uses.
So if you were going to cook an omelet, what would you use in the pan?
I love ghee. So I have ghee from, you've switched over to ghee, haven't you? It was weird at first, right?
That's all we use now.
But
Me
it's,
neither. Where do you
so
get it?
ghee, you can get that.
Chamberlain's, that's where I go.
You can get it at Chamberlain's. I can actually order it for you through our Green Pastures, which is where we get our fermented cod liver oil. And it's like a combination of ghee and coconut oil. So mine has a little different flavor. I love it though. But ghee is really good. I use a lot of, because of our high activity level at our home, I use a lot of animal fats. So like if I cook bacon on a Saturday, I store the fat on the counter, I just scoop it out. So if I was going to do an omelet, I would either do organic butter or raw butter if I've had time to go to the place, the organic place. But if I have fat, I'll just use that. So like when I cook a whole chicken on the weekend, I just dump everything, all the juice, everything that's in the bottom of that crock pot, I dump it into a jar. Then I skim that fat off to cook my green beans or anything like that. I saute in that. And then at the end, that's when I would add. The hardest one for me, and to be very truthful, and reading this kind of was like as I was preparing this information, was a little bit of a knife in my side, is like when I do like potato fries in the oven or like sweet potato fries, I have just always been in the habit of using olive oil, and I've not been good about experimenting with that. So this kind of, even me, you know, you're like, oh, dang it, I gotta fix that. So my guess would be for sweet potato fries, I would probably use coconut oil, and then regular fries, I guess I would use that as well, probably. So Do you have any other questions on that?
Give
Yes.
an example of what you might eat in the morning to get your body off to a good start because of the importance of the fats.
Okay, so you don't want to know what I would eat in the morning.
Well,
It's probably pretty far from what everybody else would eat. Plus, I kind of do like a double breakfast because I get up at 3:50 and then I eat again. So mine's a little different. But if I had a classic like 9 to 5 type job, okay. And then we can also talk about this a little bit as it relates to working out, because if you work out, that's a whole nother ball game. So let's say you're not a morning workout person. You're just going to go to work and you're going to go to work at like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning. So you wake up and you have breakfast and then you're going to eat lunch. If that were me, like on a Saturday, I would make an omelet. There would be no question. That would be my number one go-to. I also really enjoy, I enjoy a lot sauteed ground meats. And then I just do all kinds of crazy stuff with them. So I'll make a big batch of it on the weekend. So maybe let's say I took some grass-fed ground beef and I maybe sauteed that with onions, some chopped up sweet potatoes, some spinach. I would throw crazy herbs or crazy spices on. I'd probably throw in like some nutmeg, a dash of cinnamon, some chili powder, and it would make just this real warm. And I would eat that. Maybe with a side of, I would eat it with a side of vegetables.
yeah.
But you could eat that, not broth. I would probably do, like for breakfast, I like spaghetti squash or butternut squash, like sweet potatoes. I would eat that on a sweet potato. But if that's super weird for you, just stick to like omelet. Or if we're in a hurry, we'll do boiled eggs. Boiled eggs and then some avocado. Avocado is a great addition in there. This morning I ate chili. I love chili for breakfast. I throw in a couple scoops of pumpkin into it, and it's really yummy. I don't know, it's really good. I really like leftover curry for breakfast. I don't know, on top of butternut squash. But this is like years in the making. You know, I know that's so far. Mark always tells me I should never tell people what I eat. He's like, nobody will ever try it until you tell people what you eat. The other thing that I do quick is I have a banana bread recipe that I make that's just bananas, almond butter, eggs, a scoop of the whey protein that we have here, some cinnamon, salt. That's going to come out. I'm going to put that recipe in the next newsletter. Yeah, because so many people recently have asked me for
I was
it.
gonna ask you.
Yeah, that I'm going to have to. So I'm going to have to actually measure stuff this weekend when I make it. So I don't measure anything. Yeah, no, ask. Please ask,
So-
because I want to give you the information you want. I mean, I could ramble on about this stuff.
So the other thing I really took from this is the big imbalance of the omega-6s versus 3s ratio.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm getting plenty of the 6s because of the meats and stuff. So what do you recommend that you introduce into your diet to elevate and really bring up the 3s, or is it through the supplements?
So the easiest, well, you know what, we never talked about too, breakfast if you work out in the morning, so we need to jump back to that, don't let me forget that. The easiest thing, I make a chia pudding, and it's just chia seeds, ground flax, I dump some coconut milk on it, it can be any liquid. Sometimes I do coconut water and coconut milk. Sometimes I do coconut milk and almond milk. It's not the best one. I do still drink almond milk, but it has a lot of fillers in it. Coconut milk and raw milk is what I use today. Or organic milk if you don't do raw. You can get raw through here. We have that every other Monday. If that's your gig, no pressure there. I can tell you all about the benefits of raw milk on another time. So I do that, and then I put like just a little bit of Himalayan salt for my minerals, a dash of vanilla, cinnamon, sometimes a little bit of raw honey that's not been heat treated, or molasses, backstrap molasses is really good.
Unsulfurated, you said earlier, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The backstrap molasses is really good there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You can get super creative with it if you want. You can drop some strawberries in it and it'll pick up this flavor of strawberries. You can drop a couple spoonfuls of yogurt, and then the probiotics will go to work and start turning the whole thing into a probiotic fest. So there's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, what kind of yogurt do you get?
the plain Greek organic. Well, okay, let me back up. It is impossible here in Lakeland that I know of to find Greek, whole fat, organic. You can find whole fat, you can find Greek, and you can find organic, but never all three in one. And that's it's a little too bad. So perfect or better, best would probably be I would go organic if you're going whole fat, because you want your fats to be the best fats that you can. With that said, the Greek has a higher protein content, so that one's a little tricky, unfortunately. I've taken to making my own, but nobody's going to do that. I realize that. Actually, the coconut milk yogurt is really easy to make. That'll be another recipe for a newsletter that nobody will make, that one, but it's really good. Colt likes it.
Where can you get the Himalayan salt from?
Publix.
Marshalls.
Marshall's.
I'm telling you, if you go back to the food section
Yeah.
at Marshalls, you can find all kinds of great finds back there. So that's kind of funny. I also want to mention on your olive oil and on your unstable oils, you want to be sure that you purchase those in a dark bottle. They should never be in a clear glass. Olive oil, if you're going to store it in a dark, cool place, that's good. But a lot of people have these fancy pour things, and they're clear, and they keep their olive oil in it on the counter, and that's really a great way for your olive oil to go rancid. So if you're going to store it on your counter, your house is probably cooler than my house, so it's probably fine, but it should be in a dark container. So before working out, we keep getting away from that. So if you're a person who works out in the morning, it's really best to consume higher fat pre-workout and then higher carbohydrate post-workout. Now that's getting really specific, but it's just the optimum for the body. So for example, using some of those same examples, if I'm going to work out like this morning at 5 a.m., I would eat a small bowl of the chia pudding with some berries chopped up in it or something like that, and then a handful of walnuts. So you can see that's quite fat heavy. And then after my workout, there's a little window there of about 45 minutes to an hour. The sooner the better to consume some form of carbohydrate. That's your best window for it. If you don't get it in that window, don't worry about it. Don't worry about getting the carbohydrates afterward. But for muscle repair and actually for preventing those carbohydrate cravings later on. So, for example, right after a workout, if there's something that you can have that will just replace that glycogen within that 45-minute window, it can help you actually stay satisfied the rest of the day. But once you miss that window, go back to fats and proteins again, because that's going to be your better stabilizer at that point. Super important for you, Leah, because of running the long distances. So, and a kombucha. A kombucha is a great example. That has just enough. So when you have the kombucha after a workout, within that, on your way out the door, that's a great quick energy that can replace some of those. Even though it's low in sugar, it has enough in it. And then, of course, you would eat a normal meal. But for you, because you do the longer distance running, it's really key that you have fats prior and then post. Within that window, you need to take something in. So that could be it's not perfect, but one of my favorites would be the chocolate coconut water. Is really good. Have you seen that? Zyco makes it. That's a really great one for post long run. You can just take it on the way home before you have a meal. Well, so the reason not to do chocolate milk, the reason I would tell you is because of the fat content. So it's going to slow the absorption of that, and it's not going to get to your cells quite as quickly and replenish you. And so then later it can lead to, how on long run days you get that where you feel like you can never catch up. That's why. So that 45-minute window, you can take in those carbs at that point, and then eat your meal, within an hour and a half after you finish.
What would another example be besides kombucha?
Of post-workout? You could actually, you can make your own Gatorade pretty simply with just like lemon and water, a little bit of honey, something like that. I mean, if we're just talking about a liquid, if you're talking about,
Fruits or something?
you could do like a fruit would be a good one. Another one that I use sometimes because you want, if it's a workout, it's a good time too to have some protein. So like sometimes if I know like I'm going to go right into clients, I'll keep a bottle, even though it's not perfect, of almond milk because of the low fat content. So almond milk with a scoop of our whey protein and a little bit of honey in it, and shake that up, and that'll give me my protein and carbohydrates right after. But so you just want to focus on protein and carbohydrates after, fat before.
Now, when you buy your oils, do you buy them organic too? Do you pick, or like, do you look for certain oils that are better, like olive oil? There's extra virgin and there's virgin olive oil.
I wouldn't worry about organic olive oil. Extra virgin is the best because it's the first press of the oil. So extra virgin is best. A dark container is important. Here's the thing. You can price yourself out of any healthy eating if you get too crazy with everything. So you've got to work within. If you're going to spend money on organics, do it on those saturated fats. Much more important because those saturated fats can either contribute to your health or take away from your health. If they're the high quality ones, they're contributing to good health. They're the low quality ones, they're not necessarily taking away from your health, but they're boosting that omega-6 ratio, which is taking away from your health. So the saturated fat itself isn't doing it. It's the fact that you're probably getting too many omega-6s.
So how bad is it if we don't eat before the 5 a.m.
What are we
workouts?
about that?
Yes, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's, at 5 a.m., there's a lot of people out there that really think that working out in a fasted state is the way to go because
So
your
should our dinner
body...
be different then, since we're not eating before we work out? Or just-
No, the fasted state is the fasted state. There's a lot, I personally, it doesn't work for me. I just don't feel good when I do it. But if you can do that, number one is that I wake up I wake up an hour and 10 minutes before we get here. So it's not like I'm rolling out of bed and coming here. So it's a little bit different. At that point, my body's had time to, really, part of it's I'm a weenie. I should just try it. I could probably switch pretty easily.
Or would it be more helpful for us to try it?
No, I feel like I'd throw up everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It depends on the day.
Like I literally, when I eat something before I come, I eat that at 4 o'clock in the morning. I wake up at 3:50. The first thing I do. The other problem for me is that often I'm rolling right into clients and I know that I won't have a sufficient meal again for 2 more hours, 3 more hours sometimes. Like I didn't actually get an opportunity to eat today till almost 8 o'clock and we worked out at 5. So I've got to work within those. I can control what I do before I get here to work. I can't control it once I get here. So it's fine to work out in a fasted state. That's a great way for your body to tap into excess glycogen, to burn through some fat. Okay.
What kind of coconut milk do you buy?
Oh boy. So coconut milk is one of those things you can price yourself out of it. I don't buy the best. You can buy the best at Chamberlain's. It comes in a can that's BPA free, all that. Because the big thing that you hear a lot about with the coconut oil is that that the inside lining of the can, all your cans have like a lining in them. Supposedly they contain BPA, and because of the acid in the coconut oil, it releases some of that. I would tell you, take a step down. I buy the Goya brand. There's no added things in it. Always look at your ingredients. It's in the Mexican section or the Hispanic section or the international section, whatever, depending on where you are, with the Mexican type foods and things like that. I like that one. It doesn't have a lot of fillers and gunkers and gums and things like that in it. I don't think it has any. It may, if it has anything, it has like one other ingredient in it.
And you use that to make your chia seed pudding?
Do not buy the coconut oil that's in the carton. or the coconut milk that's in the carton, like in the refrigerated section. It's crap.
I read the ingredients and this is terrible, but it's supposed to be great. I
Yeah,
never
it's
thought about the,
Crap.
um,
Yeah.
the Goya
So
stuff.
yeah, so if you're
So-
concerned about the BPA, I would just tell you that you're better off to worry about BPA in a lot of other places
Right.
in your diet than inside the can.
So
of the
when you
coconut.
make chia seed pudding, you use the Goya stuff?
Yeah, shake it first.
Uh-huh.
When you first open it, it'll be separated into cream and
Yeah.
coconut water. So that cream you can actually do a lot of yummy things
Yeah.
with. Making like whipped creams
Yeah.
and things like that, and then drinking the coconut water separate. But if you shake it up and mix it all in, I also put unsweetened coconut flakes in my
Yeah.
chia pudding. Just I mentioned that just because, just a little extra coconut. Because I mean, it's like I don't get a lot of other coconut in my diet, and it's really good for you. So the unsweetened stuff though,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of coconut.
you don't like it? It took me a little bit. The coconut oil, I think, is the easiest one to incorporate. But, yeah. The coconut milk is really nice in smoothies if you're a smoothie
Yeah.
person. I don't do smoothies very often. It's just not satisfying to me. But you can hide a lot of great stuff for you in smoothies.
That's why I do
I
it.
have such a hard time eating vegetables. I like them, I just, that's a stretch to say I like them.
Just
Like,
the time and preparation. and things
yeah,
like
to
that.
eat them raw is disgusting to me.
Like salad?
No, I eat a salad every day at lunch, but other than everyday lunch salad, which has a ton of vegetables on it, I don't touch vegetables because they're a pain in the butt, but I know I shouldn't touch them.
You know, I really wouldn't worry about it so much. So actually the nutrients that come from high quality meats,
Okay,
if you were to do a comparison,
yeah,
chart that out, you would find that you'd be better off to eat high quality meats. And
Nice
you
and
would get a
fuller.
better nutrient profile by increasing that than you would
Okay.
by worrying about the
vegetables.
other, yeah.
Okay,
And that's why, like a baby, the
So
first foods are things like egg yolk.
Yeah.
So, first food doesn't have to be a vegetable.
that's good.
Avocado, it's not a vegetable.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
yeah,
cool.
if you were to get real crazy and incorporate a little bit of high quality liver, you get absolutely everything you needed.
What
I
does
know that's
liver
a
taste
big
like?
stretch
Go ahead,
for
Jen.
all of you. It's taken me a while,
What does it taste like?
like liver.
Yeah, there's nothing to compare it to.
There's nothing to compare it to. So I'll give you one little tip. If you, I cannot stress enough how healthy it is for you, high quality liver. So a couple of things. Number one, it's really gross, but you can boil like high quality chicken livers in broth and then make like a pate with it. I know it's filthy looking, but then you freeze it in an ice cube tray. And then you can pop out like 1 or 2 cubes and drop them in just about any soup, and you don't even know they're there. And then you're consuming.
You do not know
Where do you get liver?
You can buy it at the store. I order mine because they don't have the really high quality
Yeah.
liver. So I order mine through our meat co-op.
Gotcha.
You can get it out of the Lakeland Organics warehouse too. They have really high quality meat out there. So when you start talking about high quality and those things though, I know that you start to get a little pricey. So that's where I mention to people that it's a great place to add in a lot of eggs. Eggs are your cheapest high quality protein. They are your
What kind do you buy at Publix?
If I was to go to Publix, Eggland's Best is pretty good. And then there's one, it's a blue container. It's called, they have like 3 different containers. They're clear and it has like a blue strip on it. One's 4 grain, not that one. Remember, we don't want chickens that eat grains. That's not what they eat. The blue one is called omega-3s maybe?
I think
or
it's
that.
something like that. That's what
Yeah.
we get.
So if I was gonna get them at Publix, that's what I would get. I don't have a great source for free range eggs. Yeah, I really don't. So anyway, so that's I'm working on a chicken coop. I'm working on that. It's like a Hakka co-op chicken coop.
Cool.
We're talking about it. So eggs is a great cheap source for your proteins and your fats. Raw milk, can't say enough about it. There's that, and raw cheeses are really good too.
We can order that through here.
You can get the raw milk through here, yeah. Yeah. And Those are your least expensive forms. Also, I should mention though that Walmart has brought in a really pretty amazing line of like organics. They have wild caught tuna in cans, and it's like they have wild caught salmon in cans.
Really?
At Walmart, yeah. I mean, they just recently brought that in. They also have a great brand called Harvest Land, which is an organic, like your poultry, which is really good too. So Publix is a great source for a lot of other stuff, but when it comes to those few things, because it starts to come down to the money.
Yeah.
I mean, it just when you start to get into all that. All right, you guys, thanks for coming. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you think of any questions, shoot them to me. If you were at Sugared last week, by next Wednesday, I should be all caught up and you'll get the video and the answers to all the questions you sent all in one big mass email. And we'll do the same with this as well. Sorry.